Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to Starting Your Own Business. This workshop is made possible by the TD Charitable Foundation, as well as the United States Government Small Business Administration and SCORE, the organization I volunteer with. Today, we're going to focus on the goals that you might have in mind when starting your own business. First of all, to know what is most important for you when starting your business. Second, to identify any topics you might need to learn more about before you dive in. And third, to help you determine perhaps what needs your attention sooner rather than later. I invite you to ask questions as they arise. You can do so either by unmuting yourself and just asking away, or by putting them in the chat window. Either way is fine. But I love having people to talk to in this day and age. So if you want to ask them verbally, that's great. If we could start out just to sort of, by way of giving everybody some introductions, if I could ask you to put a little bit of information about yourself in the chat box. In particular, well, in the chat box, your name will be at the top anyhow, but if you could describe a little bit about the nature of your business, whether you're just in the idea phase or in the process of starting or already in business, and in particular, any key questions or topics that you hope might be addressed today. That would be very helpful, and I will do my best to try and address them as the day goes along. So to that end, my name is Whit Ford. I'm a mentor with SCORE here in Portland, Maine. I've been with SCORE about 6 years. Before that, I had my own small business in Maine for about 25 years. I've also worked for a corporate strategic planning consulting firm. I've worked for an industrial barcode data collection network hardware manufacturer, and I've taught high school. So I have a bunch of things in my background. Makes me useful for perhaps not much, but it's been fun learning about a whole bunch of different things along the way. So SCORE, if you're not familiar with us, is a group of volunteers mostly who help by either presenting workshops as we're doing today, or by mentoring one-on-one with clients who wish somebody to help them with something in the starting or growing of their business. Often we are not consultants doing work for you, but we can serve as a sounding board. We can help generate ideas. We can help you prioritize things. So many people like to work with a SCORE mentor because it gives them greater confidence in starting up their own business. I see we've got a bookkeeping business. We've got home business making altar items for churches, IT managed services, a cafe, general contractor, pursuing a craft business, and another business. Don't know if that, orofacial myofunctional therapy business. There we go. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Okay, so thank you all for that, and keep those business descriptions coming. Thank you. A dietitian, an energy healer, consulting business, setting up some SEP retirement plans. Wow, all over the board. Wonderful. Okay, so our plan of action for today. We have 7 topics we're going to touch upon. First, bust some myths, then talk about defining your value proposition, then the process of setting up your business, testing your idea, some financial basics. I'm going to refer you largely to other potential workshops for more financial information, but we'll talk about some really simple basics. And then what's a business plan, how you can go about developing one, And then we'll end up by providing you with a list of resources that may be helpful to you in your next steps. So, startup myths. The first myth that we hear often is that all you need is a good idea to be successful in business. A business is a lot more than the product or service that it provides. A business is a whole series of systems and processes and people that have been put in place to deliver that product or service. So an idea is not enough by itself. To build a business from the idea, you need to build a structure around the idea that helps deliver on that idea. And all that stuff that helps you deliver, that is the business. So that's often more work to put together than it was to come up with the idea. And that's okay. There's a lot of creative work that goes into that too, but you need more than just an idea to be successful. The second myth is that you won't have to work as hard as you do in your day job right now, working for somebody else potentially. And that's not the case, because most small business owners end up putting in considerably more than 40 hours a week, certainly in the first couple of years as they try and get their business launched and growing. But also because as the owner of the business, if something goes sideways, it's on you to address that. And so as the owner, you end up jumping in to fill in gaps when necessary. And the buck stops here. It's your business. You're the one that cares the most about making sure that things happen as you want them to. Third myth is you can deduct everything and don't have to pay taxes. Well, if you earn a profit, you will owe taxes on that profit. However, you can deduct reasonable business expenses. That's sort of true. You can't deduct everything. You can only deduct things that are expenses that are valid for your particular business. And so, yes, you can deduct business expenses, but you will pay taxes on your profit at the end of the year. So that is definitely a myth. Fourth myth, you don't have to report to a boss. Well, you are your own boss, that's true. However, you may also have lenders who lent you money. You may have partners or investors who've provided money. You probably have major customers who look to you as the owner of the business, as the person who can say yes or no to their request or their demand. So while you may not have a boss in the sense of a 40-hour week job where you report to somebody, as the owner of a business, you do still, in effect, report to a whole bunch of people. And you as the owner are weaving together that web of connections that help you run your business. But in some ways, you're accountable to all of them. So in some ways, you have more bosses. You're in control of your business, though. So that's probably more control than you may have had in a job working for somebody else. And the fifth myth is you get to do only the work you want. Well, as I sort of said earlier, sometimes you got to fill in where you're needed, particularly if it's your business. So eventually that might be true once you get big enough to hire staff to do various things. But initially, no, you probably need to do almost everything. And the only things you're not doing are things that you've subcontracted out. So almost every owner I know has spent a fair bit of time doing stuff they didn't particularly wish to be doing at the time, but needed to get done. So that's why all of the above are generally not true and considered to be a myth about starting up a new business. So your role as the owner of a business, whether you want to have this as your role or not, is First of all, to sell your product or service. As the owner of the business, people are going to look to you as the chief salesperson for your business. Who else knows it better? Who else is more motivated to make sure that you have happy customers? So even if you hire people to help sell your product or service, you will still be the ultimate salesperson for your business. You need to get comfortable using your financials to help monitor your business, to make sure that you are likely to achieve the results that you're aiming for. You may not be a financial expert. That's okay. You'll get better with every passing year. Don't worry. But you do need to take personal interest in your financials and learn enough about them to be able to spot when larger things might be going sideways. And the third thing you need to do as the owner of the business is you need to find the funds that you need in order to get the business started and to allow it to continue to operate until break even, when your business starts generating cash. Some businesses generate cash very quickly. Other businesses can take months or even several years to get to break even. And so doing an analysis of how long it might take you to start generating cash is very important to helping you determine how much money is going to be needed to start this business and then nurse it successfully until it starts generating cash. So, three things to assess. First is assess yourself. Do you have the background and support that might be needed to start this business? Do you have the personal experience, whether it might be a skill set or companies you work for and knowledge with the industry, or what special sauce in your background makes you particularly suitable for starting this business? Secondly, do you have family support? Given that starting a business will be time consuming at one or more points, is your spouse or your parents or your children or all of the above, are they willing to support this effort? Because it is going to take you away from family at one point or another, not forever, and it will become manageable in time. But there will be points where for a month you're running around pulling your hair out, trying to get stuff to work as you want it to. And you may find that you don't have the time for your family. So you need their support in this endeavor. And the third is, what's your tolerance for risk? Every new business is by definition somewhat risky, maybe very risky. And there are things you can do, which I'll be talking about, that can reduce the level of risk for yourself. And that's great. But even if you reduce the level of risk to zero, it's still going to be perhaps riskier than what you're doing now. And so think about whether you are willing to embrace that risk that you're taking. If I put $10,000 in my business, if it doesn't work out, am I willing to lose that? If your answer is no, I'm not willing to lose my initial investment, then you might want to re-examine what your risk tolerance is, in this case, from a financial perspective. But your risk tolerance could be based on time, it could be based on money, it could be based on emotional state, it could be based on health. There are lots of things that could lead you to feel that a new business is too risky for you right now. So think about your background, your family support, and your tolerance for the risk that you will be taking on in starting a new business. Secondly, do you understand your strengths? Many people look back on themselves and see, oh, I'm really good at this. Well, you're probably good at more than just that. And so think carefully about all of the things that, if you do say so yourself, you think you are somewhat talented in. In a small business, all of those have a good chance of being useful. So Think about that carefully. Secondly, what are your preferences? If you've had a fair bit of work experience, chances are every job you've had has had some things you loved and some things you hated. So those probably have led to your having some preferences for doing some kinds of work and not others, or working with some kinds of people and not others, or being in some industries and not others. Think about your preferences and which ones are well addressed by this business and which ones might be, which elements of this business might touch upon things that you have tended not to like so much in the past. That's not bad necessarily. You may be able to find subcontractors to deal with those parts in time, but you'll probably have to deal with them somewhat. Are you okay with that? And then the third thing to think about are your passions. Just because you're talented at something doesn't mean you love to do it. And just because you love to do something doesn't necessarily mean you're talented at it. That's okay. Does this business scratch some combination of itches for you that are enough to sustain you when times are tough, when you're overworked and stressful? Do you love the things you love about this business enough to get you through that long week? It's often going to be one of your passions that helps you get through that week. So do take inventory of your talents, your preferences, and your passions, because all of those are likely to be important to you in launching this business. And then thirdly, do you have the resources? Starting a business takes money, takes energy, takes dependable health, or it takes certain skills, and it takes time. If any one of these is potentially constrained for you, then think very carefully about how you might manage that constraint as you start the business. Money is a constraint for just about every business owner I've talked to. And we'll talk about more about possible ways around that constraint. But energy, health, skills, and time are all things which vary greatly from one person to another and one family situation to another. And so the only thing I can guarantee is that starting a new business is probably going to take more of all of those things than you might expect. So do you have that capacity? So the most important first step after you've done some reflection is to think about and define your value proposition. And that usually is something that we emphasize, because one of the most common mistakes that people make when starting up a business is building something that nobody wants. If you offer service for which there's a lot less demand than you expected, or you make a product that is not what people want to buy, then the business isn't going to work. So your first goal before you spend too much money is to make sure that your product or service has a market, that there are as many or more customers out there who want exactly what you want to offer. To do that, start by defining the problem that your customers face. So what is the problem that you are solving? And once you've defined that, it's a good idea to ask yourself, well, why is this a problem for your customer? What is it that makes this a problem? And then the third question, related to everything I was just talking about a minute ago, is, are you driven to help solve the problem? If this is not a problem that engages you, then you might want to rethink whether this is a business for you. But if you love helping people solve this problem, then that's a good sign. So you can start the process by asking yourself, who is the person who experiences your problem? And we call this developing a buyer persona. You don't have to answer all of these questions here on this slide. And by the way, we will be sending out a copy of the slide deck to everybody afterwards. But you need to think about, who do you expect to buy your product? If you're selling to companies, is it very large companies, medium size, small? Is it companies in a specific industry, in a specific region? If you're selling to individuals, what are their hobbies? Where do they live? Do they tend to be male or tend to be female? Do they have particular interests? Are they in certain professions or industries? What is the common thread that you can use to connect the majority of people that you expect to buy your product or service? So some of these questions may be relevant to you and others may be totally irrelevant, but coming up with a buyer persona or two or three of them is very useful in all the steps that follow. So it's not that you have one buyer persona, but you may have several, but start with one that you think is the type of customer that you're likely to see most often. Worry about the other personas later. Start with just the one you're going to see most often. Now that you've started sketching out that persona, of the people with that persona, who tends to experience your problem? One big question is, can they afford what you offer? And then secondly, why is it that they experience the problem? And is your solution really going to work for them? So in the process of thinking that through, you may conclude that, that first persona I put down, maybe that isn't my primary buyer. Maybe my primary buyer is going to be a slight variation on that or a subset of that. Anyhow, you may find yourself going through this process a few times until you land on some buyer personas that you feel describe your market well and represent a promising, big enough market for your product or service.
Vai ser o quê? Business, uma coisa aqui da escola. Eu mandei o link para você. Já começou.
So the third step is define your solution. What is it that you're offering? So as an example, say I use a dog walking service. And this picture might describe what you envision when somebody says a dog walking service. But as you think about your solution to the customer's problem, do try to think about what other alternatives might be to the customer's problem. And obviously, this alternative might be more lucrative for you if your arms are strong enough to hold all those leashes at the same time. But even there, once you have a second idea, there might be further ideas which might look very different. So just because you started off with one idea, don't constrain your thinking to just that. Try to consider a wide variety of alternative approaches to solving the customer's problem. In particular, look for approaches that your competitors are not using, and or, if possible, find an approach that your competitors will find difficult to emulate. If they cannot offer it as well or as easily as you can, then you are less likely to experience competition from them. So that's the goal in making sure that you know who your competitors are and you can, know who they are, identify what they're good at, and then figure out how you're going to be different from them in a way that you can continue to sustain over time. So all of this leads to you writing your value proposition. The value proposition is a short statement that describes really all of what I've just been talking about as it pertains to your company. It answers the question of what's the problem you're solving and for whom. It answers the question, well, what are you selling? And perhaps even how does it solve the problem? It answers the question of how does your customer benefit from it? And it ideally also helps answer the question, well, why should somebody buy from you instead of your competitor? The hard part is it should be a succinct statement. It should be relatively short and sweet. It's often shorter than an elevator pitch. So to develop a value proposition, many people like using a sheet like this. On the left, you write down some bullet points on what is the problem that my customers experience. And then on the right, you write down some bullet points that describe elements of your target market from your buyer persona. Who is buying my product? Who experiences this problem or this set of problems that I wrote down on the left side? And then as a third step in the middle, you now describe what is your solution that addresses the problem for the target market. So in the case of my dog walking example, maybe I say, well, dog walking takes time, it's expensive, and who likes scheduling things with other people? The people who are going to be frustrated by this are obviously going to be people who own dogs. If they don't own a dog, they're not part of my target market. They're probably urban dwellers because suburban people can just let the dog out in the backyard. They're probably higher income because they can afford a dog and they can afford a dog walking service. And they might often be working couples because they have two incomes and they're away from home for much of the day. And so the solution is to make it easy to schedule, to provide socialization with other dogs, so more than one dog at a time, perhaps also provide transportation services, and maybe you could offer grooming services or whatever else you're interested in offering. But one key element of your solution is where do you want to price yourself? In this case, suppose they decide to price themselves at a premium price because they're offering a premium service. Competing solely on price is often very challenging because somebody else comes along and can undercut you. Okay. I see your message, Patricia. Thank you. Let me look at the list here. Sorry, hang in there with me for a second here. There we go. Okay. Okay, continuing along. So for this particular value proposition, it might be for busy urban professional dog walkers, our full service dog walking ensures your dog's needs are met while saving you time. Well, to tell you the truth, I have seldom found a value proposition statement that I didn't feel couldn't be improved. I've never been happy with anything I've seen or anything I've written myself for that matter. If you read your value proposition and you're sitting there saying, I got to do better, I got to do better. Well, you have a lot of company. I feel that way about ones I've written too. So don't let that get in the way of proceeding with launching your company. Let it just serve as something that you're using for yourself at the moment. And if you come back and look at it a week later and you think of an improvement you can make to it, great. But don't insist on achieving perfection with your value proposition because that is often hard to do. If you want a formula for coming up with your value proposition, it is fill in the description of your target customer, comma, describe your product or service and how it addresses a pain point and why you're better than the competition or the status quo. It doesn't have to be terribly long, but it should address what's your product or service and who's your customer and why should they buy from you. A bunch of words that are often very useful to have in a value proposition are things like simple, friendly, fast, fresh, and so on. One note of caution, if you use words like only or first or best, be sure that that's true, that you really are the only, or you really were the first. And you may find that that is important. You don't want that to come back and bite you. So, any questions so far? The key to what I've just been talking about for the value proposition is that you should think about your product or service from your customer's perspective, not your perspective as a business owner, but how does the customer perceive it? That's something which many people find difficult or challenging to do at first until they get the hang of it. So you can always go out and ask a couple of people, hey, you've used my product, my service. What did you like about it? What are the best one or two or three things about it? Why would you buy it again? What's the one, two, or three reasons that are most important to why you buy it again? And that could serve the basis of value proposition thinking. Any questions?
Excuse me,
Yes.
I have a question. My name is Christiana, and I don't know if we will be talk about this or, but about my competitors. Okay, people may sell the same thing me. For example, I want to open a restaurant. And my restaurant is specific from, for example, barbecue.
Mm-hmm.
And I have too many restaurants close to me, but no barbecue food, just Chinese food or Mexican food. They are my opposite or my competitors, or no, or just restaurant barbecue food are my competitors. You understand me? I'm sorry about that. Some
That's a
mistake.
good question.
Hmm.
The question I would ask is, can they easily become a competitor or not? So suppose there's a Chinese place right next to you. They might not serve anything that they label as barbecue. Or they might have a couple of barbecue dishes on their menu. It's quite possible that they might get a smoker and start offering a bunch of barbecue things themselves. But if they don't have room for a smoker, they're not going to be able to do that. They might be buying smoked foods from other people and just reselling them. So in the end, if you are smoking your stuff on premises and they don't have the room to do that, then you could claim, all our barbecue is made here. And that's something they could not claim, even if they offered something similar on the menu. So to answer your question more directly, I would say, if you are a restaurant, all other restaurants are potential competitors. The question is, are they direct competitors or indirect competitors? For you, any restaurant is an indirect competitor, because somebody could be walking down the street saying, let's have dinner. And they look at all the restaurants and they pick one of them. Maybe it's you, maybe it's somebody else. But if they pick somebody else, that means that's a customer you did not get today, even though that other restaurant does not offer barbecue. So every restaurant, I would say, is an indirect competitor. Now, if somebody's coming down the street saying, I want barbecue, and you're the only place on the street that says barbecue, then in that sense, you have no direct competitors.
Okay. Thank you.
But both are important. Now,
Thank you.
any day. One other thing, and this is true, for instance, you often see gas stations all along the same section of street. Well, that's because gas stations have learned that they have more business if they're next to other gas stations than if they're all by themselves. And so as a restaurant, you may find that a location with a bunch of other restaurants nearby gets you more business because this is an area that people come for dinner. And they may not have decided where they're going in advance. On the other hand, if there's no parking in the area, maybe that's a disadvantage because people can't find a place to park if they're coming from out of town. So that's where it becomes important to know who your customer is. Are they all local and walking, or are they out of town and driving, in which case they need parking, in which case being close to other restaurants but no parking would not be a good location for you. So it's a complicated question to answer well, and the answers you have to your buyer persona, as well as who your competition, both direct and indirect, is, will help you come up with a good answer. Other questions? Okay. Next step, once you've defined who your customers are, where your market is, what your competition is for yourself, is to actually set up your business. Now, there are a variety of business types, and you will probably wish to consult with an attorney and or an accountant in deciding between them, but everyone has its advantages and its disadvantages. You can start operating your business today as a sole proprietor and report all your income and expenses on your tax return, and that's fine. Or you can establish a legal entity like a limited liability company or a C Corp, or some sort of a partnership, which is often a form of an LLC. And that legal entity is a separate person from you in the eyes of the law. And so if somebody sues your business, they're suing the business, not you. So by establishing a separate legal entity like an LLC or a C corporation, you are making it possible, if you operate that business properly, that's a big if, you're making it possible to help shield your personal assets, like your home or your retirement account, from any liabilities that the business might incur. If somebody sues your business, that might cause the business to go bankrupt, but at least it doesn't touch your house and your retirement fund. So, providing you've not pledged your house as collateral for some loan that the business took out, that's a different story. So each potential structure has its own advantages and disadvantages. And that's why an attorney who is well-versed in legal structures is somebody that is worth consulting to make sure that your choice makes sense for you. It should be driven by the type of business, the kind of money you need to start it, and what your capital structure is going to be. Are you just going to use your own money? Are you going to get loans? Are you going to seek investors who own shares of the business? Are you going to bring in a partner? What? All of that will influence the type of business that's most appropriate. And your growth expectations may also affect it. If you expect to grow very quickly, you're likely to need more money. And so how is that money going to be raised to fund the growth? That might drive you to a different business structure from the very beginning. If you don't expect to grow very quickly, just slow and steady over time, then that might also influence your choice of business structure. So the types you're choosing among are sole proprietorship, a partnership of some sort where you own the business jointly with one or more other people, a C corporation, or a limited liability corporation. A partnership can be set up just as a partnership of sole proprietors, in effect, or it can also be set up as a multi-member limited liability company. And so this is where the things can get complicated and it's worth talking to an attorney. The one thing I will say is every one of these structures provides different sets of possibilities for who has how much of a vote in decisions. That voting percentage can be different if you wish, or it can be the same as a percentage of profits that each person has a right to. The amount of legal risk that each person takes on can be different. You can have general partners and limited partners, for example, and that can also affect the amount of taxes that each person owes. So that's what comes together to make it more complicated at times, and that's why it's worth consulting an attorney and or an accountant before deciding on the type of business you wish to establish. If you establish some sort of a partnership where you and one or more other people all somehow jointly own the business, it is absolutely crucial that you have an operating agreement or a partnership agreement. This agreement is sort of like a prenuptial agreement and a divorce agreement all rolled into one. It defines the type and nature of the partnership. It describes a bunch of common situations that can arise in partnerships and how you expect to resolve them. And because of that, it can help you avoid very costly legal battles later. There have been a large number of partnerships where people have started a business, it's grown, it's been successful, and then one partner says, you know, I want to sell out and leave the partnership and go do something else. I'm tired of this. So I expect you to buy my share of the partnership. Well, if the partnership agreement, the operating agreement, did not address how the business is going to be valued when a partner leaves, you may have a big argument on your hand, and you may both go to your respective attorneys and have your attorneys try to work it out. And that can result in some very expensive legal bills. So it's usually recommended that each partner have their own separate legal representation in developing the partnership agreement. And do use an attorney who's experienced in working with partnership agreements. I see a couple of questions here. Could I talk a little bit about S Corp? An S Corp is a tax status election. And so you don't form an S Corp, you usually form either a partnership or an LLC of some sort and elect to be taxed as an S Corp. Now, if you do elect to be taxed as an S Corp, there are a bunch of S Corp restrictions that if you don't meet them all, you cannot take S Corporation status. The benefit of being taxed as an S Corp is that the owners can reduce their payroll tax liabilities after a point. As I understand it, and I'm not an accountant, so check with your accountant, but as I understand it, once you've paid yourself fair compensation in the eyes of the IRS for the job that you do for the company, any earnings above that, that you take as compensation from the company, your owner's draw, need not be subject to payroll taxes. So that might save you about 15% of what you'd otherwise have to pay in self-employment taxes. If you just take the money, all profits out of the company at the end of the year and pay them yourself, you will owe income tax on it to the federal government and the state, and you will also owe self-employment tax on that number. So Social Security and Medicare taxes. So you can reduce but not eliminate that self-employment tax as the owner, or not the owner, as an owner of an S corporation. All other types of corporation will see income distributions taxed. If it's a C corporation, you're either getting his payroll or you're getting dividends. Dividends are taxed twice, once to the company, and then once to the person receiving them. So they're not very favorable. Your income is fully subject, your W-2 income is fully subject to payroll taxes. In an LLC, you may not be paying yourself W-2 income, but all of your income is reported at the end of the year and subject to self-employment taxes. If you're in a partnership, income will be distributed by filing a Form K-1, reporting to the IRS who gets what share of income. Once again, that will typically be subject to self-employment taxes, as I understand it. So S-Corp can reduce some of your taxes. Definitely talks to a tax accountant before deciding whether an S-Corp will work for you or not. Next question. Will your resources include a template for an operating agreement? No, not here. But if you go to our website, which is at the end of the slide deck, we do have a template for a single member LLC operating agreement, and we have a separate template for a multi-member LLC operating agreement, a partnership. So I do encourage you, if you're going into something with a partner, to start with our multi-member LLC operating agreement template, because that'll help reduce the amount of time that you have to spend talking to your attorney and save you money, just by familiarizing you with the kinds of questions that the partnership agreement should address. So I'll mention that when we get to the end. And thirdly, what kind of documents do we have to get to Space Partner? I don't understand the question, Cristiano. What kind of documents we have to get to
Let me to be clear. If I share some space with other people, okay, and open the business together, other people.
Okay. If you're sharing your business premises with somebody else, I would generally recommend that you talk to your insurance agent, first of all, because you could have insurance issues. You want to make sure they have their own liability insurance. And secondly, you may wish to sign some sort of a lease or sublease agreement with them, making it very clear exactly what space they're allowed to use, for what purposes, during what times, so that there are no surprises and no miscommunications between you and them.
Okay.
Okay. Some other important details in setting up a business. You will need to have a company name, and that needs to be a name that is not in use in the state where you're registering the company. So you can check with the Maine Secretary of State website. They have a search tool. You can verify whether the name is in use in Maine or not. But you also should probably check Google, and you should also check the USPTO, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Registry Office. They have a site which you can do a search to see if perhaps that name is registered as a trademark nationally, in which case you might not wish to use it. But then also do a Google search and make sure that whatever name you might use for a website is not already in use, because that might also influence your choice of name. Then, as I was just talking about, establish your corporation legally, consult an attorney. Once you've done that, get your federal EIN number, which is often required to open up a bank account in the name of the company. Not always, but often. You may need a sales tax certificate from the states in which you are doing business, if you are in a business which is required to charge sales tax on the products or services that you sell. For example, as a math tutor, I did not have to collect sales tax. As a computer consultant developing custom software, I did not have to collect sales tax. But the minute I started selling standard software, I did have to collect sales tax on that. And if I resold a printer to somebody, I had to collect sales tax on that. Some professions need licenses, either from the state or perhaps even the federal government. For example, if you're an attorney or a doctor or an architect, you need a license. So check with the state to see if any licenses are needed. And if you're opening up a home occupation business, you might need a license from the town in which you are operating. So check with your town to see what licenses they might require. Every town can be a little different in that department, depending on their ordinances. And then once you've got your name, you've set up your company and you have your EIN number, get a business checking account for your company that will be checks in the company's name. And like that, when a customer pays you by writing you a check, or when you receive payment via credit card or whatever, that payment will be to your company name, and you cannot deposit that check into your personal checking account unless you've registered that company name as a doing business as name with the bank. Normally, though, you'd have a separate business checking account, and you want to keep your business finances completely separate from your personal finances. So never, ever, ever buy something for personal use using business funds. That could destroy the protection that the protection for your personal assets that the business affords. If you buy something for the business with your personal money, that's okay. You then give it to the business and write yourself a reimbursement check and put the receipt in your business records indicating you bought this for the business with personal funds, and you've, just like you do with an employer, you've reimbursed yourself for that company expense. Okay, if you open an EIN, are you subject to taxes if you don't launch the business in a year or two? If you have an EIN, then you may get called by the IRS if you do not file a tax return, but you can certainly file a zero income and zero expense tax return. That's no big deal. That's easy to do. And no, there are no taxes owed if you don't have any, excuse me, if you don't have any payroll and don't have any profit. Getting an EIN will not expose you to a tax liability, but it might require you to start filing an annual tax return, even if it reports zero revenue and zero expense. Talk to a tax accountant to get a better answer on that. And second question, would you need a sales tax certificate in Maine if selling on Etsy, for example? If you sell to an out-of-state customer, then no, you do not have to collect sales tax on that, but you have to be shipping to an out-of-state address. If you ship to an in-state address, that is subject to sales tax, and you will have to collect sales tax on that sale. Every state has different sales tax rules. So if you're on Etsy and you sell one small thing to somebody in a distant state once a year, maybe you don't need to worry about that. But if you're selling regularly to people in that state, you should learn what that state's sales tax regulations are and strive to comply with them, because if you don't, the tax penalties could be worse. There is one company, I forget its name off the top of my head, which specializes in helping you keep track of all those different states' sales tax regulations and helps you submit appropriate taxes to the appropriate states at the appropriate time. Obviously, you pay for the service, but it can save you a heck of a lot of time and effort. Okay. All that fits under the umbrella of understanding the regulations that will apply to your business. Every business may be subject to different regulations. There could be municipal issues as well as state or federal issues, but under the municipal umbrella, you might need a business license from your local town. You might be operating in some sort of a zoning or historic district that you need special permission to do. You might need consent from your landlord, depends on the terms of your lease. You might need to get the fire marshal to inspect your premises before you can open, or verify that you meet certain building codes for specific uses of that particular property. You might be subject to local taxes. For example, in Maine, businesses pay a local tax on their assets. It depends on the town you live in. And you might need a certificate of occupancy. From the feds or from the state. Depending on the type of business, you might need a state or federal license. But the minute you have customers on your premises or have employees on your premises, you have to make sure you're complying with ADA requirements and fire safety requirements. If you have employees, you have to understand labor laws and immigration law. If you have employees, you need to understand IRS and Social Security withholding and payment requirements. Even if you don't have employees, you should learn about paying estimated taxes. They won't necessarily be due in the first year that you operate your business, but if you're profitable, you will probably owe estimated taxes in your second year. Ask your tax accountant about that. You don't have to pay any more per year. It's just the IRS wants their money sooner than the following April. And then lastly, as we're talking about sales taxes. Then another part of setting up a company is insurance. Do not overlook insurance. The reason for insurance is to protect the business. And you don't have to have insurance, but it's possible that if something happens and you don't have insurance, if the cost of it is too great, it could bankrupt your business. So the typical types of business that people get with property insurance, security bonds to if you don't do good work, or if you're doing work in a homeowner's home, you might need a bond in case you break some other part of their home and they say fix it and it costs a lot of money. That bond might help pay for that. General liability. If a customer's on your premises, you need liability in case they slip and fall, etc. If you operate any motor vehicles for the business, you need to talk with your insurance company about that. Your private auto insurance may not cover that. If you have any employees, do you need to participate in workers' compensation? Are you offering them health insurance or life insurance as a benefit? And then there are a number of types of insurance that might be specific to certain kinds of businesses, such as if you are throwing very large events, you might get insurance just for the duration of that event, say general liability insurance, or you might have liquor liability insurance, things like that. Talk to an insurance agent. Tell them what kind of things you're doing. They will recommend a laundry list of different types of insurance policies that they could offer that they think might interest you. Just because they propose them does not mean you have to buy them. It's your decision as to whether you wish to pay the premium in exchange for the protection that that policy offers or not, which means that if that thing happens, you would have to bear its cost yourself from the funds that are already in the business. So if it's something that might cost me $100, I don't need insurance for that. But if it's something that might cost $10,000 and my business doesn't usually have $10,000 in the bank account, maybe I want insurance for that if I want the business to survive. Another choice is you could say, no, I'm not going to carry the insurance, but if somebody sues me and I lose, I say, fine, the business is yours. You know, there's $10,000 worth of assets in the business. It would have cost me 3 times that to defend against your lawsuit. I don't recommend that approach. Talk to your insurance agent, talk to your attorney, and make a decision based on those conversations. Another question, are there any insurance companies located in Maine you can recommend? There are many insurance companies located in Maine. Most of the folks that people buy insurance from are insurance brokers, not the insurance companies directly. Many brokers represent multiple insurance companies, and they will generally propose options from multiple companies if those are the best options for you, in their opinion, or perhaps they'll propose a package all from one company. The advantage of going to a broker is that you are getting that broader view of what's available in the market, because many larger insurance companies are specialized in offering just one kind of insurance or another. So look on Google for commercial insurance brokers and talk to several and see which one seems to understand the nature of your business the best. That would be my recommendation. Next up, build your team of professionals. Now, what do we mean by this? I do not mean these are all people that you're paying to be subcontractors or employees. Some of them might be, but some of them might not be. So, for example, if you work with a SCORE mentor, such as me, you are welcome to consider me as part of your team of professionals, even though we only might chat once every 2 weeks or once a month or whatever. I'm part of your team because I'm somebody that you are talking to about your business, or maybe about part of your business. In the same way, your attorney is somebody you only call in occasionally, but they're familiar with your business and they are part of your team. Think of them that way. As is your banker. You may not pay them explicitly, but you have their account there, and maybe your account pays them fees, or maybe they don't pay any interest on your checking account balance and they take that money that they earn and use that to fund their operations. But your banker is part of your team, particularly if you have a loan from them. Don't consider your lending officer an enemy. They're, in effect, almost a partner of your business. They want to see your business succeed so that you can repay their loan. They are part of your team. Your insurance agent is part of your team. Your accountant is part of your team. Peers who also are in business, whether they're competitors or not, can be people you turn to for advice. For example, you might talk to somebody who runs the same kind of business as you do, but in a different city or a different state, so they're not really competing with you. And the two of you might become best buddies because you're sharing tips that you both learned from operating the same kind of business, but in different locations. That can be invaluable. And then trade organizations. If your business has a trade organization, look to it as a potential source of insurance. It depends on the trade organization. Some offer, some don't. But some of the benefits of joining can be better insurance. For example, if you're an architect, I think you sort of have to join some architects trade association in order to get architectural insurance in case the building you design falls down. So trade organizations can offer many benefits for some professions, perhaps not so many in others, and then other industries don't have a trade organization. But do research it if it exists for your industry. Next up, test your idea. So you've defined the value proposition and identified your customers, your competition. You've decided what kind of business. You've got it set up with your checking account. And now you're ready to begin operating. But before you invest a ton of money, because so far, everything I've talked about does not take a lot of money. Maybe $500 would do it. Maybe $1,000, but definitely under $1,000. So before you start investing a lot of money, test your idea to make sure the market's really there and that they really like your product or your service. So the first thing we generally recommend is, can you bootstrap your business? Now, by bootstrapping, what we mean is, can you yourself, from your own financing, fund your business's growth? That could be a combination of using profits that your business generates, but it could mean also that you're keeping your day job and using some of that salary to help fund the initial costs of your business. Doing so can help reduce many initial risks for your business, particularly the financial risk, and is much easier to do if the cash needs of your new business are smaller. If the business you're starting requires $100,000 to start, that's a totally different thing. But if you only need $500 to buy a little inventory and start selling at the farmer's market, heck, that's a great way of testing the market. Doing so allows you to learn about your target market from personal experience, not just doing research in the library or talking to people on the street corner. You're actually selling to people and figuring out why they buy, what do they like about it, what made them buy this instead of something else. You are gaining incredibly valuable firsthand sales experience in selling your product or your service. And so starting small is a great way to go to reduce your risk because it helps you start to understand your market better. And it helps you to validate your idea and help to build an initial client base. So it turns out, suppose it turns out that some of the things about your product or service aren't quite right. Well, you can fix them quickly and offer the new and improved version next week or next month. And keep repeating that process until you say, now I've got something that I think is really ready for prime time, and you can take it to market. So this is often called the fail fast, fail often approach. Get out there and sell it, learn about your market, listen to feedback, use the funds from sales to buy more inventory or make an improved product, and then repeat the process until you say, okay, now I'm ready to grow. Some ways of doing that, as I mentioned earlier, keep your day job and use your free time to build your business, but you can also do it by subcontracting. Suppose you want to go off and start business as a carpenter. Maybe you work for somebody else subcontracting as a carpenter for a year or two, and you learn a ton about the market and other stuff that way, and then you go out on your own. You let them pay for your going down a learning curve and learning lessons about the market that you're serving in the area, and then you go out on your own. A third way is maybe if you're selling a product, you could sell it through a gallery or a coffee shop or a cafe or a consignment store, or maybe there's some place that you don't have to lease space where you can offer it for sale. Now, many of those places may charge a commission that may be pretty steep, like 50% of your sale price, but it's a chance to see if it sells, to see if the market that you expect is there. And special events like church or school functions or fairs, county fairs, things like that can also be a great place to try selling your product or your service. Go out and meet people, talk to them, find out whether this is something that interests them or not and why. And the goal of all of this is ideally to keep your job at the start so that you still have the income coming in and you can take your time starting the company as you learn about the market. At some point, the demands of the new company will be too great and you may have to scale back what you're doing at your job. Okay, but try to postpone that point as long as you can if the company you're thinking of starting lets you do that. Along the way, you are assessing the product market fit. If your customers are not paying on time, well, why not? Is it because they didn't like your product or service? Better to find out early they don't pay on time so you can change your policies and insist on getting paid earlier. Maybe you have deposit, or maybe you insist on payment before delivery if you weren't doing that to start with. Secondly, as you start up by bootstrapping, hopefully you can generate good word of mouth. So one customer talks to another, who talks to another, and that way you don't have to pay for advertising, but you're building your base of customers so that when you quit your day job and go full-time into this, you already have an established base of customers. You can get customer testimonials for your marketing. If you have a low return rate and very few complaints and few requests for refunds, that's a good sign that your product or service is meeting the need well. And if few customers suggest improvements, that's great. If a bunch of customers are saying, this could be a lot better if, then maybe you could improve the product a bit before you really try to grow your market. So use your time bootstrapping, if you are bootstrapping, to try to assess how well your product or service really fits your target market and make corrections. And never stop trying to understand your market. Constantly ask yourself, who is it that I'm selling to? Is this most recent client slightly different than the buyer persona I had identified previously? If so, let me make note of that. How many of this new kind of people exist in this region? who is my competition for this kind of customer? Is it the same as that previously identified, or do I have a different kind of competition for this new kind of customer? As I enter the market, how will my competitors react? Will they try to see me fail quickly by having a never-ending series of sales right after I open up? Or are they not going to notice me? Or don't they care because they have more business than they can serve already? How will you differentiate yourself from your competitor? Is it by offering a different kind of food, as I talked about earlier? Or is it by having better service or faster delivery? Or, what's the laundry list of things that can make you better than your competition? It's not just price. Look to as much beyond price as you possibly can, because they're all important. And then don't forget, you're also selling emotion. For example, one thing I often tell people when I try and persuade them that a line of credit might be appropriate for their business is, how much money do you need to have in your checking account, in your business checking account, for you to know that you're going to be fine for the next 2 weeks, and therefore you sleep well at night? If you cannot maintain that minimum balance in the normal course of operations, then you're losing sleep at night. Just think how much better you'd feel if you could take out a bank loan for 6 weeks or 8 weeks to get you through that tough patch when your bank balance is too low. And then as you get into the holiday season or whatever, and your bank balance rebuilds, you repay that line of credit to the bank, and you don't have the loan anymore, and your bank balance is back to normal. Well, that benefit of sleeping well at night, that's really an emotional benefit that you're selling. So think about your products and services and ask yourself, do they offer some sort of an emotional benefit to my customer? Does it just look nice? Does it feel good to the touch? Does it look nice on the shelf? Does having this particular tool that does this particular thing make them feel more comfortable because I'm protected against a what if? Look for emotional sales points as well as the very logical ones. I see a question here. If you have an idea for a product and need a sample or prototype, are there companies that can help with this? And if so, how to find them? That is a fairly common question. The answer depends a lot on specifically what kind of product you need. I've had people who wanted prototypes of knit products, and they had to go to Puerto Rico because, well, they weren't just prototypes, but there was a small volume batch. For stuff that's made of wood, you might find somebody in Maine. For something that needs a machine shop because it's made out of metal, it would be an entirely different kind of place. The minute you need it made in volume instead of just in some small batch, you might go to a totally different person. So there's a fair bit of research that goes into identifying who you want to go to for prototypes and whether or not that's different from who you want to go to when you start producing larger volumes. And then where's the break point between those two? And what volume do I want to leave my prototype manufacturer and go to a larger scale manufacturer? Definitely something to talk with a mentor about. So as you start up the business, you will have startup costs. Think about all of your potential startup costs. Ask your team to help review them to identify things that you might not have included. They will be guesses. That's okay. The point is to estimate how much money you're going to need to get this company to break even. And so I strongly recommend you do a 12 to 24 month cash flow projection, looking at what you think your bank balance is likely to be at the end of every month for the next 12 to 24 months. The goal is to make sure that it never goes negative. If it does, you need more cash to start your business. And the question that leads to is, do you have the financial resources that are going to be needed to get this business off the ground? And once you come up with that projection, it's easy to ask yourself, well, what happens if COVID hits again and my revenues drop by 20%. Can I still make a go of this? I'd probably be able to cut some expenses, but not others, and play with that scenario. See if it could still work. If you're going to need a loan from a bank as a new business, they're almost certain to ask you to personally guarantee that loan. The exception would be if you're buying assets they would take as collateral, like a company car. If you're just redoing the decor in the restaurant before you open it, most banks are not going to be willing to lend you money for that. So if they do lend you money, it would be because you are personally guaranteeing it, and you're maybe guaranteeing it using equity in your house or an investment account that you have. So be prepared to be asked if you're willing to personally guarantee whatever money you're asking for as a loan. And ask yourself, how much cash might you need as a reserve if things don't quite go as expected? They could go a lot better than expected. They could go worse than expected. Both scenarios might actually need more money than you initially planned. So it's worth exploring both. I've been answering questions as I go, running short on time. So I keep asking questions as they come to mind, but I'll plow ahead. Some financial basics. It is very important that you understand your financial statements. And as I said earlier, you do not have to be an accountant to do so, but you do need to do that to manage your business. So please do spend a little time to become more familiar with your balance sheet, your income statement, and your statement of cash flows. There are a wide array of resources available on the internet, including some on the Southern Maine SCORE website. We have some blog posts that explains each of these very briefly and points you to some additional internet resources if you want more information on them. And then we also have workshops similar to this one on financial topics. So sign up for those if they're of interest. Some common financial terms that you will encounter. People will talk about your pricing. Now, what do they mean by this? Well, there are lots of adjectives that can be used to modify the word pricing. Are you talking wholesale pricing, retail pricing, benchmarking your pricing? What? Wholesale pricing is what you offer to a reseller of your product. Retail pricing is what you offer to a user of your product. Wholesale pricing is often 50% of retail pricing, but depends on the industry. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. Benchmarking means comparing your pricing to industry standards, usually found by doing research or surveys. If you're part of a trade group, they might offer benchmarking data, but you might also find benchmarking data through publicly available databases. The Portland Public Library is a great resource for such sorts of things. And then the subscription pricing. A lot of software today is sold by subscription. You pay so much every month to be able to use it. Magazines are subscription pricing. That's another approach to pricing instead of pay once and then you own it. Cost of goods refers to the cost to make or acquire your product. So if you buy inventory that you resell, the cost of buying it and storing it until you sell it are considered cost of goods sold. If you make it, the labor and raw materials that go into making the product are considered cost of goods sold. Point to take note of: sales and marketing expenses are not considered cost of goods sold. So the salary you pay your salesperson is not part of cost of goods sold. The salary you pay the person who made it is. Gross profit is revenues minus cost of goods sold. Gross profit is usually the words used to refer to the dollars. So if you take your total revenues, subtract cost of goods sold, that dollar number is your gross profit. If somebody asks you about the gross profit margin, they are asking what percent is the gross profit of revenues. So take gross profit divided by total revenues, that's your gross profit margin. All your other expenses are generally going to be overhead, things like rent, utilities, marketing expenses, and other administrative employees. But there, as I said before, some things like sales commissions or salaries for salespeople are not considered cost of goods sold, but are not exactly a fixed cost either. They might go up and down with the volume that you sell. So they might not be considered overhead, but they are a variable expense. I'll get to that again in a minute. Net profit is the bottom line. Revenues minus cost of goods sold minus all other expenses. If I talk about net profit, I usually mean the dollar value. How much profit did you make in the period? If I talk about net profit margin, then I might be talking about your net profit divided by your total revenues. And that would be the percentage of your total revenues that you end up earning as profit after you paid all your expenses. So those are one set of fairly common terms. Another set is break even, which is the point at which your business first starts to earn a profit. So that often happens a number of months after the business opens, and many people will refer to it as a certain level of revenue. You know, once I reach this much revenue, I should start earning a profit. So my goal is to get to there and beyond so that I am a profitable business. Then your costs are often thought of in two buckets: fixed costs and variable costs. Fixed costs are those that do not change with your sales volume, and variable costs are ones that do change with your sales volume. And the reason those are important is because during COVID, for example, businesses with high fixed costs are often the first to fail. When your revenues go down, your fixed costs don't change. So if your fixed costs stay high and your revenues are too low, you're losing money every month, and that can't go on forever. If all of your costs were variable costs, as your revenue goes down, your variable costs go down, you should continue to make money, maybe less money, but you're still making some money. So watch your fixed costs. And when you start up, do work really hard to minimize your fixed costs. And lastly, cash flow. This refers to how much cash is generated by your business. In some businesses, this is the same thing as profit, but in many businesses, this can be a different number than profit, often lower. Not always. It takes an accountant to explain all that. We have a number of workshops that talk about cash flow and how to figure it out, but keep an eye on your bank balance. If your bank balance went down by $100 from last month to this month, that's your cash flow for the month. So if your cash flow is positive and your bank balance is growing, that's always a good sign. If your cash flow is negative, that's a bad sign. So do set some goals for your business, some financial goals for your business. Typical ones are to have some revenue, some sales goals, some gross margin goals. What percentage of revenue do you expect gross margin to be? And if it's higher than that, watch out. What do you want to get for net profit? And then check that you're achieving those goals or making progress towards them every month. Otherwise, if you only look once a year, you can't change things in time if things are going the wrong direction. And cash rules. So do keep your cash flow forecast up to date. Not every month, but every couple of months, do a quick update and make sure that your bank balance looks likely to remain healthy out in the future. You don't want to run out of cash. So to help with all that process, you might want to develop a business plan. Now, a business plan is a living document. It's not set in stone. You don't write it once and forget it. The goal is to have this be something that helps you document your vision and your planning for the business. It might be 2, 3, 4 pages long. It might be 30, 40, 50 pages long. It depends on how complicated your business is. It describes everything I've talked about earlier: the problem, the solution, the market, the competition, your financial forecast, your team, your business model. And it's often something that a lender or an investor will ask for before they're willing to lend you money or invest money in your company. So if you're writing your business plan for somebody else, not just for yourself, then be aware that it's going to be read by knowledgeable, skeptical people who've read lots of business plans before. They know that the numbers in your business plan are a wild guess on your part. That's okay. They're not expecting your numbers to be right. But if you can justify where they came from by providing some objective data from third parties when relevant, even if it's not exactly what you're hoping for, that's better. And above all, state your assumptions. If you think revenue is going to grow 5% every year, then say that. And that's where my numbers came from. Oh, I just grew last year's by 5%. Or if you think your market share is going to grow or shrink or whatever you think, put those assumptions on the side of your revenue forecast and document them in your business plan, because people will question the assumption. And if they feel your assumption is reasonable, then they'll go with your numbers. Who's it for? A lender, investor, a partner, key employees, maybe your trade partners, your resellers, your key vendors. But most of all, it's for you to help you plan for your business, minimize the risk before you start your business. And by thinking things through first, avoid making mistakes that you might have made had you not thought it through earlier. Now, a business plan, sort of like selling your first product, is an iterative process. You go through the thought process of what's the problem, who has it, what's my solution. You then start making a product or service. You start testing it, selling it, measuring how well it works, tweaking it, repeat the process. Well, your business plan is describing all of this. And so that's what can make it longer in some companies. But it's a document for you to look back on later and remind you that, oh yeah, I want to do this, but also to set some goals for yourself. This is what I hope to have accomplished by the end of the first year. And if 6 months in, you find that that's totally unrealistic for any number of reasons, fine, revise it. It's written for you. So keep it as a living document and do keep working it so that it continues to describe your business and be useful to you in thinking through your business. So starting a business can be a lot of work, and it may not be for everyone. But if you know your market and you know your customers and you're willing to learn and adapt, then go for it. But make sure you're aware of what the financial and time and other risks might be before you jump in with both feet. Build a team, write a business plan. Doesn't have to be perfect. It can be 2 pages, just sketching out your plans, whatever you want to write, and approach it in a thoughtful way. And it can be very rewarding. I know I managed to work for myself for over 25 years when I'd never succeeded in working for other people for longer than 6 or 7. So I always burned out. I get overworked. And now working for myself was challenging because I had to sort of let my focus shift from year to year so I didn't get too sick of any one thing I was doing. But as the owner of business, I could do that. And so it's a wonderful thing. Here are some resources for you. If you wish to look up some of the blog posts I was talking about earlier or find other workshops we offer, thisscore.org/Southern Maine will get you to our website. There's the Maine Small Business Development Center, another SBA partner. They offer a number of additional workshops and also additional counseling. So do check them out for the resources they can offer your business. The Small Business Association offers a number of loan guarantee programs and other programs. Often your bank will end up connecting you to them, but by all means, check out the Small Business Administration, become familiar with the programs they offer and find out whether any of them might apply to you or not. As you get larger, the Finance Authority of Maine might be a resource that you call upon. The Maine Chamber of Commerce or your local Chamber of Commerce in the town you're operating in might be a useful resource for you. The state of Maine, every time I've contacted them, they've been very helpful. So don't be bashful about contacting the state of Maine with questions about sales taxes, labor law, whatever. Check out their website and call them on the phone if you got additional questions. These are all wonderful resources that you can make use of. And then lastly, some common funding sources in the state of Maine. The most common sources of funds are shown on the left here. Personal savings is top of the list. Friends and family comes second, although it can have drawbacks. Third most common source is funding competitions or grants. Both of those are harder to come by. Maybe you get lucky, maybe you don't. You may have a great pitch for a grant competition, but somebody else's is better. Crowdsourcing, that can work if you have a crowd that's already following you. If you've built a following on social media, you might be able to make crowdsourcing work for you. Loans, those are reasonable sources of funding after you've been operating a year or two. Your business history will be factored into a lending decision. But if you're new, you're probably going to have to guarantee any loan personally, unless your business has assets it can offer as collateral to the bank. And venture capital generally isn't going to be interested until you've proven there's a market and have sales and are showing that you can grow fast, and you need a lot more money to keep growing fast. So that's why they're in this order. This is a very specific order. Most people follow this order in seeking funding for their business. Where can I find funding is one of the most common questions. And other than, do you already have the money you need yourself? It can be a challenging question to answer, but we can help you try to pursue that. Within Maine, the chart on the right gives you a sense of some of the potential sources depending on the kind of thing you're interested in and the kind of business you might be in. Anyhow, a SCORE mentor can help you identify all of this. And just by parting words, SCORE was founded in 1964, so we've been around a while. We're throughout the country. We've got about 320 offices, so no matter what state you're in, you can find a reasonably local SCORE chapter with free mentoring services there, as well as workshops. SCORE is a nonprofit. We're a partner of the Small Business Administration, and so that's us. If you want to get a SCORE mentor through Southern Maine, you're welcome to scan this QR code, and that will connect you to the website, which will let you sign up for a mentor. That's all I have to say today. Sorry, I ran over a little bit here. I'm happy to stick around for a little bit if you have further questions. I'm happy to address them now. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and everybody can see one another. Let's see. There we go. Any further questions you would like to address?
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
You're very welcome. Thanks for joining us. Okay. Have a wonderful afternoon. And yes, an email with a link to the recording of this workshop and the slide deck will be sent out probably in a day or two. So you will get that. So have a wonderful afternoon.